All right, how's it going? Hope you guys are doing well. So today we're covering the topic of PC builds. Recently, I feel like I've gotten the question a ton of times. Where do I go for a PC build? What should I pick when it comes to case, components? And really and honestly, there's such a variety of components out there nowadays and really good high quality cases that you really can't just give one direct answer. So if you are the type of person that just can't decide what direction to go with when it comes to your next build, this might be something a little different than what you're used to. Now, the more you look around this case, you can see where they took some inspiration from another company. It's really nice to see that these cases are going more mainstream. And I'll be honest, I plan on doing a build in this case like months ago. It's just been constantly out of stock everywhere. Like, I think this sold way more than they anticipated. It's finally here, and I gotta say, it's really refreshing to build something nowadays with modern hardware that matches the size of gaming consoles. The thing is, not only can you get really good performance in a form factor like this, but there's reasons other than gaming that after assembling it all together, you might even be convinced to consider going in this direction for your next build. So buckle up, grab a snack, let's get into the specs. Now, right off the bat, you're gonna notice we are going with Team Red on the GPU side with the RX 7900 XT, which now at its current price is actually an exceptionally capable option. It's had about 10 months of driver updates, now down from its initial $900 launch price. And I can actually recommend it for a build like this. You can find these for around $750 if you shop around right now. You're also getting a full 20 gig VRAM buffer, and you've got some flexibility if you're into tinkering with overclocking headroom or downclocking. So as you can imagine, another decision that had to be thought out was processor choice, and this one happens to be personal preference. The mid-range has been a strength of Intel in recent times with the i5-13600K and KF being a really solid performer for the price. For not only gaming, but having extra E-cores is fantastic for production loads. You can also take advantage of having the last chance to carry over some DDR4 you have from an existing build if you want to cut down cost even further. We've gone with 32 gigs of DDR5 in this case, which was about $100, so you can expect good stuff, especially when paired with a solid motherboard, which is a really easy place to overspend. Small form factor builds have been catching the wave recently. These smaller Mini-ITX boards can be pretty pricey. Like in some cases, you'll spend more money on a board than a processor, depending on the platform. So the Strix B760i is a pretty viable option here. It has dual PCIe 5.0 M.2 slots, Wi-Fi 6E support, 2 DIMM slots, and port selection is pretty nice. It manages space pretty well, and other than the Game On reflective sticker, it's fairly muted. Now, a huge difference maker for immediate games on a system is a fast new NVMe drive. You have no idea how many people question why their computer's running so slow when in reality storage has gotten dirt cheap and components like this are a night and day difference over mechanical drives. So going with a Crucial P5 Plus is like a no-brainer. You can easily add a second drive on the back if you need to upgrade in the future, and they're super easy to access. Now, another thing to note is while cooling a chip like this, it's totally doable in a form factor, but you can actually improve the thermals by upgrading the stock Intel ILM. These thermal contact frames from Thermalright are about $10 on Amazon, and they essentially fix the coverage gaps in pressure distribution on the IHS. So you get way better cooler to cold plate distribution overall over the stock Intel frame. And you can just install it like you would any other mounting plate. You want this frame to sit evenly and not over tighten it. You would think a billion-dollar company like Intel would have perfected this, but no. Next thing up is installing the mounting hardware for the cooler, which is pretty simple. We went with the Noctua NH-L9X65. It's a low-profile cooler, and it happens to fit well. For installation, just use the LGA 1700 kit. There's a rear back plate and some blue spacers that you'll use, and then thread on the thumb screws to secure the mounting bars. And then add a little bit of thermal paste and go ahead and mount it on evenly. You can also go ahead and plug this into the CPU fan header, and I'm happy to report we are almost done. So okay, now that we're done installing everything on the motherboard, we can move on to the case, which is where things get interesting. The Fractal Terra is one of their first, if not their first, small form factor case, and it's actually pretty good. I mean, you can tell where they clearly took inspiration from the sandwich style Form T1, but this is essentially their first shot at bringing an enthusiast small form factor case to the masses. So here's how it works. The entire case is a very modular, almost Apple-like anodized silver finish that's accented by a slab of wood at the front. The interior has about 11.4 liters of volume based on exterior measurements and has this spine system that can be adjusted based on how much space you want to allocate for the CPU or the GPU. So the accessibility options are pretty awesome. We have 7 levels to adjust for variable positions when it comes to clearances. You can loosen both sides, so we can slot the motherboard in and line up the IO shield with the back of the case. Now, there's a lot of small intangibles and features that have been with this case that are really neat. Once the motherboard's been secured, you can plug in the PCIe riser cable, which just slots into place. As for the connectors, on this specific board and case, you can plug in the USB 3.0 cable, USB-C connector, and power switch, which just slots into these 2 pins. If you're using a different board, just refer to the manual and it should show you exactly where to be looking for. So then power, let's talk about that install. Typically on a power supply that isn't modular, you have to deal with cables everywhere. But since we're using this mini SF750, we just need to use these 3 cables to power everything up. This is a pretty awesome little power supply. It's 80 plus platinum. The cable sleeving looks pretty sweet. And first thing you'll do is plug in the 24-pin motherboard cable, followed by the 8-pin CPU cable, and 2 more 8-pin cables for the GPU. After that's all plugged in, unscrew the 2 screws and hold the power supply bracket on the case and secure it to the power supply. Now there is an option to mount it with these standoffs depending on the GPU configuration you're going with. If you're using a flow-through style GPU, you can direct the hot exhaust air into the power supply and then out the top. But if you have a solid backplate, the power supply is better suited with the fan toward the CPU side. You also have the option to add another fan under the power supply that would exhaust air. Typically in these sandwich style cases, negative pressure can be optimal for temps since you're encouraging fresh air intake from these side panels. From there, it's pretty much just plugging it all in and managing the cables, the 24-pin, 8-pin, and now we can install the GPU, which is literally just slotting it in and tightening the thumb screws on the bracket. So something to note, when I initially set this up, I noticed that the distance you set the GPU from the side panel of this case specifically can generate noise. It got kind of annoying, so I ended up adjusting the spine to have the graphics card as close to the side panel as possible. Since they're not using a mesh style panel, these vent cutouts do seem to mess with the acoustics. But other than that, just a couple subtle tweaks, get your cables running nice, and everything should be good to go to power up. But yeah, as far as downsides, there's not too much going on. The thermals are really manageable. We're getting great performance. And I can pretty easily say that if you're looking for an easy mini PC to build, because there's a bunch out there that are not as user-friendly to work with, this is a really solid option. It's not gonna take half your desk space. It's not gonna scream at you with RGB. I mean, you could pretty much pack this up in a backpack if you really had to. So yeah, it's a serious contender. And if you're looking for a build like this, and you're in that price range, might be a consideration. I'll have everything linked down below. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, feel free to drop them also below. Drop a like if you liked it. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one.